Okay, I call the case of Kimberly Hassel versus UW Milwaukee. This is August 18th, 2020. This is a CR 2017-2986, EEOC case number 26G 2018000230C. I'm Administrative Law Judge James Schacht. Ms. Hassel appears in person, pro se. Appearance for the respondent, please.
Jennifer Herzog on behalf of the University of Wisconsin-Milwaukee.
Okay, this is a continuation. We have a witness here. Ma'am, would you raise your right hand, please? Do you solemnly swear the testimony about to give in this matter will be the truth, whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
Yes, I do.
Okay, then my understanding is that we're dealing with this as a that the complainant hasn't rested, and that Ms. Hassel, you are dealing with these witnesses as cross-examination rather than not doing them as adverse cross initially. Is that agreed that Ms. Herzog would question these witnesses first? Any issue with that? You muted yourself here, so.
Sorry, I have no issue with Ms. Herzog beginning the questioning.
Okay. All right. So so go ahead, Ms. Herzog.
Could you please state your name for the record?
Melissa Spadanuda.
And what was your position at the University of Wisconsin-Milwaukee in 2017?
I was the Associate Director for Research Compliance in the Department of University Safety and Assurances, and also the IRB, or Institutional Review Board Manager. And
just in elevator pitch, what is the IRB's role at the university?
The IRB's role is they have oversight over all human subjects research being conducted by the faculty, staff, and students. And the IRB exists based on federal regulations. So because UWM receives federal grant money to conduct, because we receive federal grant money, then in addition, since we're doing human subjects research, we are required to apply the regulations for the protection of human subjects. As part of those regulations, it stipulates that the institution must have an IRB.
And is that true even if a project is not being federally funded, we have to have an IRB?
If we were not receiving any grant money, an institution could not have an IRB. But because we kind of are tied into this requirement that we must, you don't have to, it gets pretty tricky, but you have to follow the federal regulations. And because of we do more than minimal risk human subjects research, that therefore requires us to have an IRB.
Okay. What projects require IRB approval?
So it has to involve, there's multiple definitions. So it meets a specific definition about research. So the idea that you conduct a study and you're also planning to share the knowledge beyond the institution. So you're going to either publish it, present it at a conference. The knowledge base goes beyond the institution. So it meets this research definition. And then you meet the definition of human subjects. So you're either interacting with people, collecting information from them, or you might not interact with the human at all, but you might have access to private identifiable information that then generates the trigger for a human subject.
How does the IRB learn that someone may be non-compliant with its rules?
It can come from a multitude of ways. It could come from a complaint from a person in the community. It could be from the researcher reporting it themselves. It can come from the IRB finding it through annual reviews, or we go out and we evaluate records of ongoing research studies. So we might find non-compliance through those post-approval reviews as well. Or just anybody in the institution that has a question or concern can contact the IRB and ask a question.
What happened? So what's the IRB's procedure if it learns a project may be non-compliant? In a nutshell.
Sure. So really investigate our own records. Do we have a study on file? If we don't, then we would often reach out to the researcher themselves, ask some questions, find out could this possibly be true? Really the quickest and the first steps. And then if you find something from there, you could take it further into expanding the people we ask questions of.
And I just wanted to note in the circumstances that my rulings regarding that they're not a respondent on this, and I want to avoid situations where your questions seem to open up or claim that open up areas that I have said that we're not going into. So go ahead, the next question.
About how many cases of potential non-compliance or actual non-compliance does the IRB address each year?
So there are different levels of non-compliance, but some of them are really minor, just a deviation. You didn't do something you said you were going to do, and we can fix it very easily. So I'd say in my time in the IRB, we probably had between 20 to 40 non-compliance reviews a year, most of which were deviations, which didn't require additional review. And then if it's beyond a deviation, then it triggers a more extensive review, including subcommittees and the full committee and so on.
A question came up yesterday about serious non-compliance. So I just want to clarify, how often have you seen serious non-compliance?
Once.
Was that a career-ending situation?
No. The person had the opportunity to correct. They corrected. They actually completed the study where they with the noncompliance and had submitted future studies that they were able to complete and receive approval for.
I'm going to ask you some questions about Dr. Hassel specifically. Do you remember approximately when you first learned that she may have a non-compliant project?
March 2017.
And when you learned she may have a non-compliant project, did anyone direct you to open an investigation?
No. No.
Did anyone direct the IR but you did open an investigation?
Yes.
Who made the decision to open an investigation?
It follows our procedures. So if there's some triggers within the procedure that require us to then dive deeper. If it's not obvious that there's no non-compliance, then you continue going down the path to evaluate whether there is non-compliance.
Once you started investigating, did anyone direct you as to how to conduct your investigation?
No, just the procedure itself.
Would you say the investigation followed standard guidelines?
Yes.
Who made the decision to find Dr. Hassel non-compliant?
So that's always a committee decision. So there was, in this particular situation, there was a subcommittee review. The subcommittee made a recommendation to the full IRB committee, where that full IRB had the opportunity to discuss that recommendation, and they can ask for more, they can ask further questions, they can ask the PI or the researcher to provide more information back to them before they make their final decision. But it is a full committee decision. It's based on a vote, and then the majority vote is the standing final decision. And in this case, the full committee made the recommendation and the vote.
Did anyone tell you how you should what outcome you should find here?
No.
To the best of your knowledge as the chair, did anyone tell the committees what outcome they should vote for?
No.
And is a finding of noncompliance, to be clear, is that discipline or a sanction?
No.
There's also some question yesterday about noncompliance letters going into a record. Who receives the noncompliance letter?
So any type of noncompliance, so there's an exception. If it's serious or continuing noncompliance, that is a different category, and that letter will go to the dean. The dean would be copied on that letter. In this situation, it was a general noncompliance. The letter went to Dr. Hassel as the researcher. And
Did it go to the dean as
no,
well? Did it go to HR or a personnel file?
no. But I don't know. I did not send that. I only sent it to the PI, the researcher, sorry.
Okay. Have you ever discussed the investigation into Dr. Hassel? Have you ever discussed that with Stan Stojkovic?
No.
I'm gonna leave my questions off there and give Dr. Hassel an opportunity for cross with the opportunity to redirect if necessary.
Of course. All right, go ahead. Go ahead, Ms. Hassel,
Thank you.
on cross.
Hi.
And remember that this is only asking questions of that. You have a chance to testify yourself later, but this is only for asking questions.
Yes, sir.
Okay.
Are you still an IRB administrator?
No.
How long were you an IRB administrator?
From 2007 until 2020.
And did you receive any specialized training when you became the IRB administrator?
Yes, there's multiple opportunities for training, city training, online training. I've also received a certification to be a professional IRB. It's called CIP, Certified IRB Professional. So you pass a test to really document your expertise in the field.
Great, thank you. And you talked a bit about federal regulations on human subjects research. Can you tell, so you testify that human subjects research is when there's any interaction with human subjects, is that right?
Collecting information about that person, yes.
Okay, what about de-identified data?
Objection on relevance of this?
Response?
I'm trying to get an understanding of what she considers human subjects research and how that differs from evaluation research.
And
Why?
how does that have to, and what does that have to do with showing, in this case, that the sole issue is whether or not the Helen Bader School in any way attempted to influence or direct or start this investigation?
It's central to the allegations and the investigation. It's the central issue.
I don't, my understanding is that the only issue is whether the respondent violated the Wisconsin Fair Employment Act. And so that those are the issues. So how does it relate to how your allegations that the respondent violated, in this case, the only thing that you alleged is that the Helen Bader School illegally, I mean, that they attempted to influence or to start or to direct this investigation. My understanding is that's the only allegation that you have regarding the ILB, correct?
It's going to become relevant if you allow me. She just talked about human subjects research. All I'm asking is de-identified data the same as human subjects research? Ms. Herzog opened the door to the question. She asked, what is
I
human
thought
subjects research?
Again, the concept of opening door to things, if it's not relevant, it's not relevant, and I'll go into the situation. I am not hearing, that this is only, the question in dealing with that, this is only about whether you have evidence that anybody from the Helen Bader had any influence or dealing with the investigation of you. And I don't understand this question to go to the only question regarding the IRB, which is before me. So I will sustain the objection.
Okay. Who first contacted you about allegations of noncompliance or possible allegations of noncompliance against Dr. Hassel?
There was a meeting, I believe legal was present, the department chair, and they simply asked a question if particular research studies should have had IRB approval.
Okay, and so they specifically asked if research studies should have IRB approval?
They had specific studies they asked about.
Okay, were those studies evaluations?
So those were the 3 studies that were part of the IRB review for noncompliance in 2017. I don't know the names of the 3 studies off the top of my head. One was found to be human subjects research, and the determination was there was noncompliance. There were 2 studies that were found to be evaluations and were not found to be, there was no noncompliance found.
Okay. When Drs. Hassel and Dr. Freiberger being the department chair, correct? Dr. Freiberger was a department chair who attended the meeting with you?
The
On
first
March
meeting,
24th?
pardon, what date?
March 24th?
Yes.
Okay. And when Drs. Hassel and Freiberger first started their remunerative consulting work, they contacted you for guidance on when to run evaluation projects through the UWM IRB, or when the IRB needed to review those. Is that correct?
Object on relevance.
The my understanding is that, at least if I'm that that she's asking whether or not that she had been given instruction to Ms. Hassel regarding when to go to her for when things needed to be reviewed or not. Now, and I will overrule the objection to just dealing with as to whether or not the things regarding what instructions, if any, that she was given. So go ahead. Do you understand what the question is? Is that, did you give Ms. Hassel a instructions regarding when she needed to go to consult with the IRB?
Dr. Hassel and any researcher can contact us anytime to ask for advice of when a study may or may not need IRB review. And yes, Dr. Hassel and Dr. Freiberger had over time contacted the IRB on occasion with questions.
And one of the central questions that both Drs. Hassel and Freiberger asked you was when evaluations needed to go through UWM IRB review. Is that correct?
I don't recall.
Okay. Is there a difference between evaluations and research?
I think people can define those words in many different ways. I can't answer a question unless I know the specific details of a research study. It is very complicated. So a person has to come to the IRB with the specific situation. They're planning to collect what information from whom, what is your role? Are you serving as a investigator representing the University of Wisconsin-Milwaukee? Are you serving as a private consultant and you're doing this completely on your own outside of your role as a researcher at UWM? Is the information identifiable? Are the human subjects vulnerable? So many different questions, and we just, unless I have a exact description of what the project is, I can't answer the questions.
Okay, let me ask the question a different way, Ms. Spadanuda. Do federal regulations that you testified you're, required to follow, do federal regulations provide a distinction between evaluations and research?
There's a specific definition of research, yes.
Is there a specific criteria, federal criteria and definition for an evaluation?
No, they define research.
So the federal regulations do not discuss evaluation at all?
That I don't know.
Okay, so you were the IRB administrator for a really long time, is that correct?
Yes,
And you received specialized training for that role, is that correct? Just yes or no?
yes.
And you
Because I don't understand how this is relevant. It's getting down to a very hyper-specific definitions issue that I don't know is relevant to this case.
And response?
there is a distinction, there's a federal distinction by law between evaluation and research, and I'm asking her, she should have the knowledge if she's certified and had training, and so I'm asking her about that.
And I will, it's this objection sustained. It is not about the evaluation. I mean, she has indicated that these are very specific situations, but that, we're not, this case is not involved the IRB determination and its actions itself in the matter. It's dealing with attempts to influence. These questions do not in any way go toward the issues before me, so I will sustain the objection.
On the 24th, March 24th, 2017, when you met with administrators and Dr. Freiberger, did Dr. Freiberger provide you with Dr. Hassel's activity report?
Yes,
Is that what you used to investigate noncompliance against Dr. Hassel?
that was a starting point.
You testified that there were 3 issues that you investigated. Is that correct?
Yes,
And were those 3 issues covered in the activity report you were provided?
I don't remember off the top of my head.
Did you discuss, or did Dr. Lovell contact you on behalf of Dr. Hassel and Dr. Freiberger to understand and be able to instruct Drs. Hassel and Freiberger about when evaluations needed to go through UWM IRB review?
He could have. Do you know that? I don't know. I don't remember all of my conversations with people over 13 years.
Did you do any preparation for your testimony today?
Yes,
Did you review the exhibits that were submitted?
yes,
So did you review the emails between you and I that are exhibits?
can you point me into the page?
I will try to do that. Please give me 1 second. Can you please go to ERD 534, which would be
She has those in front of her.
Do you have those, Melissa, or do you need us to share a screen with you?
I'm going to it.
So that would be Respondents Exhibit 6, page ERD 534.
Okay.
And do you see the email from me to you dated Tuesday, March 28th, 2017?
Yes.
And can you read the first sentence, please?
I don't have dealing with it. It's in evidence. My understanding is in the, I mean, you don't mean out loud, it's just for review. The having people read in stuff that's already in evidence is not,
Okay,
I won't do it either way.
okay.
So what are you asking her from her memory about this?
Okay, does it state in this email that you discussed when Dr. Hassel and Freiberger needed to run their project through the UWM IRB, that you discussed it directly with Rick Lovell?
Objection, because this is Dr. Hassel's email, not Melissa Spadnuta's email.
Okay,
And sustained, because that's not in dealing with, because you said it doesn't make it true or dealing with in a situation. So, and it says what it does. So objection sustained. Go ahead with, and just to note that we are dealing with her testimony, we're dealing with her memory, and you can ask if something refreshes her recollection, but it's not the document speaking. She's speaking from her memory. So go ahead to the next question.
okay. Okay, so just to clarify, you did review the exhibits, but you can't remember. Is that correct?
That's not what she said, because you don't have a question as to what you're asking her to remember. So go ahead with another question.
Okay. Do you remember, do you remember exchanging emails with a Marquette IRB manager regarding Dr. Hassel and Dr. Freiberger's remunerative project, evaluation project on November 21st, 2010? Do you remember that?
No.
Do you remember emailing the Marquette IRB manager on November 23rd, 2010, telling her that Dr. Hassel and Freiberger did not need to run evaluations through according to federal guidelines until they were going to create professional publications? Do you remember that?
Objection. There was just a question about whether she remembers emails from 2010. She already answered that question.
And also dealing with that, the things regarding asking about 2010 is outside of, this doesn't go to what this witness is able to speak to, which is whether or not the respondent influenced or attempted to influence the investigation. So that area regarding what was discussed or emails back from 2010 is not relevant. Go on to something else.
Okay. You just ruled that asking if she had provided guidance was relevant.
I
But now,
said dealing with these things peripherally, directly to you in the situation, that a direct guidance in the close thing, but in response to her questions and how she testified that it's very specific and she'd have to deal with specific these things, then any generalized guidance would not appear to have given the tangential issue regarding whether or not such things are relevant in the first place, since it isn't about the outcome of the IOB, which is the investigation, which this hearing is about, that given her questions in response to your answers in response to your questions, this area, I am not seeing how it's being relevant given her clear testimony that she cannot answer, that she has to know the specifics regarding the study and everything else before that she could form opinion as to whether the consultation is going to be needed. So generalized, given her testimony, generalized comments are of not any relevance to this. So go ahead with another area.
Do you remember providing guidance to Drs. Hassel and Freiberger on when to run evaluations through the UWM-IRB on 5 separate occasions? Do you remember that?
No.
So you told Dr. Hassel, so you met with Dr. Hassel on May 1st, 2017, is that correct?
Yes.
And when you met with Dr. Hassel, you told her that you had been contacted by UWM Legal about potential noncompliance, is that correct?
Legal was in the meeting in March of 2017.
So your testimony is that you told Dr. Hassel that legal was in a meeting when you first heard about the allegations of noncompliance?
Can you repeat
Is
that?
it your testimony that you told Dr. Hassel in the meeting that UWM Legal was in the meeting when you first learned about the noncompliance and not that they were the first to contact you?
Objection. I just want to clarify, are you asking what Ms. Spadanuda told you at the meeting or what Ms. Spadanuda actually recalls of the meeting?
What Ms. Spadanuda just testified to. So
That's my point of confusion. Are you asking what she's told you or what she recalls from the meeting? What she recalls of the meeting or what she told you about the meeting?
okay, so are you testifying that you told Dr. Hassel on May 1st that UWM Legal was at a meeting when you learned about allegations of noncompliance?
I don't remember what I told Dr. Hassel on May 1st, 2017.
Did you review the audio recording of the meeting, which is an exhibit in this case?
No, I did not.
I would like you to look at Respondents Exhibit 8, page ERD 544.
Okay.
Are you there? Okay, great. At the bottom of the page, there's an indication, an email from you dated June 14th, 2017 to Jay Kapelish, and I'm sorry if I'm pronouncing that wrong, Aaron Bush, CC to Melody Harris, and Leah Stoiber. Do you see that?
Yes.
Okay, and it says one follow-up question, should I CC Legal Affairs on the memo since they reported the possible non-compliance or contact them separately? Do you see that you wrote that?
Yes.
And do you see that that gives an indication that UWM Legal was the first to contact you about the matter?
No, but I mean, I see the email, but it could be interpreted in different ways.
Okay, so then at this meeting, it was UWM Legal who reported the allegations. It wasn't, is that right?
The March 2017 meeting?
Yes. The meeting you had on the 24th.
It was a meeting.
Mm-hmm.
I don't remember the title of the meeting. I recall that somebody asked the question based on your annual summary of your annual summary report, if certain items listed would be considered human subjects research.
You don't recall who made the allegation at that meeting?
No.
Okay,
I also
There
didn't
was no-
object
there was
because
no-
that assumes facts, not evidence. No one ever said there was an allegation of noncompliance. Ms. Spadnudas
No.
repeatedly said there was a question.
Yeah, and those are important distinctions
okay,
in the matter that and my understanding is that she's saying she doesn't remember who raised that question. Would
okay.
you like
But
to hear the next question?
in the email you wrote, they reported the possible
This
noncompliance,
has
not.
been asked and answered.
Yeah, and dealing with once it's been over there, go on to the next something else.
Okay. Something being reported and asking a question, are those two different things?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Do you remember telling Dr. Hassel in the May 1st meeting you had with her that it was weird to have UWM legal contact you about the matter?
I don't recall.
Okay. Do you recall the Vice Provost for Research, Mark Harris, attending the meeting on March 24th, 2017?
I don't recall all of the attendees. I'd have to read the minutes or notes.
Okay. You don't recall anybody else other than Ms. Herzog and Dr. Freiberger who attended the meeting? Is that your testimony?
Yes.
Okay. So you don't know whether Associate Dean Guat Lee attended the meeting?
I remember seeing it in some notes.
That Associate Dean Guat Lee attended the meeting,
I would have to go back and look at the exhibits.
but you just testified that you remember seeing it in the notes. I just want to make sure I'm clear.
Yes, I don't remember right now all of the names that were at the meeting.
Okay, but there were several people at the meeting, more than just Associate Dean Guat Lee, UWM Legal, Ms. Herzog, and Dr. Freiberger. Is that correct?
Yes.
In the meeting you had with Dr. Hassel on May 1st, you made reference to Dr. Hassel's consulting company. Do you remember that?
No.
Okay. Do you remember Dr. Hassel explaining that she did not have a consulting company?
No.
When you first discussed Dr. Hassel's potential noncompliance with Ms. Herzog, did she convey to you that she wanted an immediate determination from you regarding whether Dr. Hassel was noncompliant?
Objection, this is assuming
No.
facts, not evidence.
Dealing with, and my understanding is that the allegations are not against legal, and that, but is to check in the circumstances whether or not Ms. Herzog was functioning as legal counsel for the university at the time or during the situation. I see that it's not clear, but in the circumstances that I'm not understanding that the legal counsel is the respondent in this case. They're representing the respondent, but not the respondent. Is dealing with just asking the situation. And it's Spenanuda, is that how you pronounce it? Dealing with all
Spadanuda.
Spenanuda. Did you what role in the meetings were you understanding that that Ms. Herzog played? Was she, I mean, dealing with her functioning as the attorney for the university? Was she another party to the situation? Or what role did you understand her to be playing?
My interpretation of the meeting from March 2017 is that there were questions. They were asking the IRB if, as an institution, are we in compliance with the regulations for human subjects research? Here are some studies. They've been presented at public meetings under UWM faculty member. Do we have IRB approval? That's basically the question. And if we don't have IRB approval, do we need it? Those were the general questions that came from March 2017.
And I just want to clarify, my objection is, it sounds like there was a private meeting between me and Ms. Spadnuda here, and that's why I'm trying to clarify. That's my objection, is I'd like to clarify that we're still talking about the same meeting of various people.
Okay, and I wasn't clear whether it was sounding like talking about another meeting or not. So go ahead and ask your next question.
Okay. Do you remember when you met with Dr. Hassel on May 1st, 2017? Do you remember telling her that UWM Legal wanted a decision during the March 24th meeting about whether or not Dr. Hassel was non-compliant?
They asked the questions, is there non-compliance? And I said, I don't know, I have to look into it. There's not an immediate response, and there was no expectation for an immediate response.
Do you remember describing the, do you remember describing the issue under investigation as being gray in the meeting with Dr. Hassel on May 1st, 2017?
Yes.
Do you recall in the meeting on May 1st, 2017 with Dr. Hassel, do you remember stating that you had miscommunicated when you told Dr. Hassel that she needed to only run evaluations through IRB when she was going to create a professional publication? Do you remember saying that?
I did not miscommunicate. I think there could have been a misunderstanding.
Okay. Do you remember telling Dr. Hassel directly that federal regulations stated that she was not required to run evaluations through the UWM IRB until she was going to create a professional publication?
No.
You don't remember saying publication?
No. No, you don't wait to submit to the IRB until you decide you're going to publish. That's not how it works. That is not. When you decide you think you're going to publish information from a human subjects research study, you need approval before you do the research study and collect the data.
Is there a difference between evaluation and human subjects research?
Objection, we've already talked about this not being relevant.
Yeah, and it's not in dealing with the circumstances that whether or not that you were misled or the reasons or whether you did, there will be in the decision no judgment on my part as to whether not submitting those three things to the IRB was a mistake or bad or anything like that. That's not for me to decide. And so these questions about whether or not that you were misled or that what she was told and stuff are not relevant because that's not the issue for the case. The the resulting, the question is dealing with whether you can prove that the, you know, the issue is proof that the Helen Bader School took some action in retaliation or um, discriminatory intent regarding this thing, and these questions do not go to the issue before me. So you need to go to something that does. So all these questions about about what you had been told previously. I was letting it in some because I thought it might be short, but increasingly is not. So it doesn't, I don't see a relevance. So go into something other than questions as to uh, that are suggesting that the issue is whether or not that you made a mistake or did something wrong, or it was not, that you unreasonably failed to submit something to the ILRB, not questions before me. This is about, we've been over it a bunch of times. So get back to something that is related to your claim and not something else. Go ahead to the next question.
In the meeting on March 24th with Drs. Freiberger, Associate Dean Gottlieb, Ms. Herzog, and some other administrators, did anybody ask you about Dr. Brandel's remunerative activities?
I don't recall.
Did anybody give you a copy of Dr. Brandel's one-page activity report?
I don't recall.
Have you been coached to say I don't recall to most questions?
No.
When did you first contact Dr. Hassel about the allegations? Do you recall the date?
I don't remember the exact date, March of 2017.
Does March 27th sound about right?
Yes,
Okay. Because you had the meeting on March 24th with Dr. Freiberger and Associate Dean Gottlieb and Ms. Herzog, correct?
yes.
Okay. Do you remember telling how many meetings have you had about possible faculty non-compliance with IRB rules and regulations where a member from UWM Legal Affairs attended?
Objection, relevance, and also potentially attorney-client privilege, depending on the meeting.
We just keep going into other areas in the situation and against that, so I'll sustain the objection. The question isn't dealing with go to, it has to do with the Helen Bader School. We're dealing with the situation and the decisions as to council, whether responded as to when they come to meetings are a different question. It's not before me. Go ahead to the next question.
What is the average amount of time that an IRB exempt project is under review by the UWM IRB?
Object on relevance.
What's its relevance? Because we're not going into whether the ILB review was discriminatory itself. So again, back to what this hearing is about. What does this have to do with your claim in this matter?
Okay, I understand. Thank you.
So I don't hear anything, so sustained. Go ahead.
Do you remember telling Dr. Hassel on the May 1st meeting that you having to look into the matter was quote unquote ridiculous? Did you think having to look into it was ridiculous?
No,
Do you remember telling Dr. Hassel in the May 1st meeting, 2017, that she had made a quote unquote innocent mistake?
I don't recall. But I will say that non-compliance often is generated from mistakes, which is why there's a corrective. There's plenty of, the whole process is meant to be corrective.
Thank you. Do you recall whether Dr. Hassel's projects that have been reviewed by the UWM IRB are IRB exempt?
I don't recall.
What does it mean if a project is IRB exempt?
It's exempt from the full set of regulations. So
The
it
federal regulation, I'm sorry, go ahead.
doesn't require annual reviews. At UWM, we do require exempt projects to be reviewed by the IRB.
Okay. But federal regulations do not mandate that IRB exempt projects are go through oversight by an IRB. Is that correct?
It is up to each institution to make that determination.
Okay, but federal regulations do not mandate it, was my question. Is
Objection.
that correct?
Again, I think we've gone down this path before and I don't see how it's relevant.
It's not. So go into the situation, you keep going into these places would have nothing to do with your claims. I understand that there are things that matter to you and that upsetting to you or whatever, but that's not what this hearing is about. So please go to something that's relevant. Because
it.
you're dealing with at a certain period of time and dealing with the situation. If that if the questions continue to be things which are not relevant to this case, at a certain point, I have to cut off the cross-examination because you haven't hit anything that's relevant. So please go to the things that have to do with anything regarding the cross-examination, which has to do actually with the issues in this case. Go ahead with the next thing.
The IRB required to investigate all potential non-compliance reported to it?
The IRB's job is to ensure that the institution and its faculty, staff, and students are compliant with the regulations. So if we're presented with a situation where there may be non-compliance, it's the responsibility of the IRB to look into that.
Do you remember Dr. Hassel telling you that Dr. Freiberger was non-compliant?
I remember Dr. Hassel presenting several names after the fact to me, yes.
When you say after the fact, what do you mean?
After her investigation was completed, I do remember her providing additional names of people that should be looked into.
Did you look into them?
Yes.
You conducted an investigation into potential non-compliance regarding Dr. Freiberger?
I would have to look at which names I had that were, if you sent them to me, yes, I looked into them.
Okay. Do you recall looking into Dr. Brandel?
I do not recall.
Do you recall looking into Dean Stojkovic?
Yes.
Do you recall looking into Dr. Lovell?
I don't recall.
Do you recall looking into Dr. Blake Randall?
Don't recall. The IRB reviews over 1,000 studies, different types of studies a year. So it's impossible to remember every activity.
According to IRB policies, the IRB can suspend or terminate a faculty member's ability to engage in research. Is that correct?
We can suspend a specific research study.
Okay, and you could terminate a faculty member's involvement in a certain research study as well?
We never have.
Okay, but according to policy, the
Well, we
IRB.
don't have, the IRB does not have a policy. The IRB has guidelines.
Okay, I'm sorry. According to the IRB guidelines, you could terminate a faculty member's involvement in research, correct?
Yes. A specific study. We cannot say you can't do research.
Right, I understand that. Thank you. Do you recall how many times you've received allegations of noncompliance because a faculty member listed a conference presentation on an activity report?
No.
Would you say that's a frequent mistake?
No.
Do you remember telling Dr. Hassel in the May 1st, 2017 meeting that it was appropriate to report non-remunerative activities on annual activity reports?
I don't recall.
Do you remember telling Dr. Hassel in the May 1st, 2017 meeting that UW system policies encouraged remunerative activities?
I don't recall.
Have federal regulations regarding the distinction between evaluation and research changed since 2010?
That's the things that this area has been removed. Please go into some that we haven't already said
Okay.
is irrelevant.
Do you remember telling Dr. Hassel in the meeting on May 1st? Did you meet with Dr. Hassel on May 1st? The meeting you had with Dr. Hassel on May 1st, was that prior to the IRB conducting an investigation of Dr. Hassel's potential noncompliance?
Yes.
Do you remember telling Dr. Hassel on May 1st that she would be receiving a letter of noncompliance from the IRB?
No.
Do you remember discussing with Dr. Hassel that she could receive a letter of noncompliance in the meeting on May 1st, 2017?
She could if it was determined to be non-compliance. She
Do you
would get a letter.
I'm sorry, do you remember discussing that with Dr. Hassel during the May 1st meeting, 2017?
No.
Okay. The Dr. Herzog asked you about who receives the letter of noncompliance, correct? And you said you sent the letter
Yes.
to Dr. Hassel?
Yes.
Does the IRB maintain a copy of that letter for their records?
Yes.
And if there were potential allegations of noncompliance made against Dr. Hassel in the future, would the letter of noncompliance that she was issued be a factor in determining the appropriate disposition by the IRB?
It could if the same problem continued to happen over and over.
So having a letter of noncompliance on file at the IRB could have a negative impact if there were future allegations of noncompliance. Is that correct?
If it was related, yes.
Okay, thank you. Those are all the questions I have at this moment.
Can you redirect?
Just a few really quick questions. Based on just this question that just came up, I want to just clarify, is an IRB investigation a punishment?
No,
Are remediative actions a punishment?
no,
Is a non-compliance letter a punishment?
no.
So what's the intent of those things if they're not a punishment?
It's intended to correct non-compliance. The institution has a responsibility to ensure we're following the regulations for human subjects research. Ultimately, the institution carries that weight and burden of ensuring compliance. Although all of our researchers are out on their own doing this research. So it really falls to the IRB and the office to make sure we're properly training our researchers, that they're properly following through with the procedures that they said they were going to follow. Because at the end of the day, the goal is to protect the human subjects participating in the research study. That is our ultimate goal. We want to prevent harm from happening. So we want to and need to review these research studies. And the goal for when we review non-compliance at the end of the day, we want to correct and fix the problem so that we are not harming human subjects. So we need to train our researchers, and sometimes through mistakes, that's our best teacher, right? So we have to correct the researcher's mistake, and then often they are required to do retraining and things like that, so we don't have the same problem again. I have never, in my years at UWM, there has never been a continuing non-compliance. A researcher has never continued to repeat those same behaviors. So it is all about fixing a problem. At the end, we do want research to happen. We want the researchers to be successful, but not at the potential to harm participants. And that's the ultimate goal.
Thank you. I just have one more question, and that's just, in your opinion, should Dr. Hassel's, I'm going to call them cases, the 3 projects at issue, should those have come to the IRB?
Yes.
Thank you. That's all I have.
I have a question, if you don't mind.
Sure.
Okay.
Go ahead.
Yes, I'm thinking of how to word it because Ms. Herzog's going to object. And you testified that you did not discuss Dr. Hassel with Dean Stojkovic. Is that correct?
Yes.
And then you testified that you investigated Dean Stojkovic for possible non-compliance.
Yes.
Did you inform Dean Stojkovic regarding why you were investigating him for possible non-compliance?
No, not that I recall.
So you don't recall mentioning Dr. Hassel made an allegation and I'm looking into it?
Yeah, I'm going to object on relevance.
Well, you already said that no, but also that is not a form of retaliation which is protected by the law here anyway. So even if there was retaliation for doing it, this law doesn't protect, or at least then there's no allegation in the complaint of doing it retaliation for raising issues regarding of non-compliance. So I will sustain the objection. Go ahead to the next question if there's anything else.
I don't have any other questions right now. Thank you.
Okay. So anything further, Ms. Herzog?
No.
Then thank you very much, ma'am, and you're excused.
Thank you. Have a good day.
All right, ma'am, would you raise your right hand, please? You solemnly swear the testimony about to give in this matter be the truth, whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
Okay, I'm still wanting to tell people to be seated, from before, would you please state and spell your name?
Tina Freiberger, Tinafreiburger.
Okay, go ahead, Ms. Herzog.
Could you tell us where you're employed
University of Wisconsin, Milwaukee.
and what department were you in 2017?
Department of Criminal Justice and Criminology.
And what was your role in that department in 2017?
Department chair.
So I'm going to just ask you a few questions about university research versus independent consulting. You've engaged in both, right?
Correct.
University sponsored. If a company wants to hire the university to perform research, in a nutshell, a couple sentences, what happens? How does that work?
So the university contracts are run through the Office of Sponsored Projects. So they initiate the contract with the agency or funding source, and they set the terms of that contract. And then we create a budget that includes the cost of the research, and sometimes there's indirect costs depending on the source of the funding. I don't know if you want more detail than that, or
universities are a foreign world to everyone who's not in one, so I just want to set some background up.
Yeah, so the contract is actually with the universities. So like I have a grant contract, and if I were to leave UWM, I would need UWM's permission to take that grant. Like that grant wouldn't go with me automatically because it's actually the university's grant.
So the company or entity that's providing the grant, who are they paying when you enter into a university sponsored grant?
That's kind of a tricky question because they're paying for the expenses of the research. So they have the direct cost, which will include an array of things. So it might be like student time, it can be faculty time. So they'll pay a percentage of a faculty member's salary to release them from other duties to work on that research. And, if there's any equipment, any travel expenses, any, sometimes labs are funded by certain disciplines. So that's all, it's flow through the university. So the money comes through the university, but it's spent on the research cost, essentially. Then some research grants, depending on the funders, have indirect costs associated with those. And those are to pay for the administration of the grant. So it costs the university money to actually administer all the grants. We have the Office of Sponsored Project and Social Welfare. We have the Shared Office of Research that works through all the administrative functions and so forth. So those indirect costs essentially are supposed to cover all of that, as well as the whole infrastructure of the Office of Research at the university.
So at the end of the day, to cover all that, the company or the entity is cutting a check to the university, and then the university's distributed out. If I'm summarizing that correctly.
Sort of, yes. I mean, again, like if somebody estimates the cost of their project being $10,000, but the costs are only $8,000, like UWM doesn't get to keep that $2,000, right? That goes back.
Got it. You said you've done some independent consulting. When a company wants to hire you personally as an independent consultant, what happens then?
So you just negotiate directly with that company. And then there's terms set on, whatever terms that you agree with the company to do the project and do the work. And then you're paid directly.
Does the university get any money?
No.
Okay. What are the top benefits for a company of contracting with the university as opposed to you as an individual?
So for the company, it's the association with the UWM brand. It's the infrastructure that's put in place to manage grants. We have the ability to pay students, so sometimes that can help budget-wise, because if you're paying, you know, an individual to do work, you may be paying their hourly rate versus a student hourly rate. I would say that's, if it's a large project, especially, you know, the management piece it can be beneficial, I would say.
Dr. Hassel is a member of the Criminal Justice Department, correct?
Correct.
Have you done independent consulting work with her in the past?
I have.
Did you ever seek IRB approval for that independent consulting work?
Not, well, okay, so when we did the project as consultants, we did not. So it was independent from the university. But then later when we wanted to present the results and possibly publish them, then we received IRB approval to use the data.
So even though it was the result of a private consulting project, you did go seek IRB approval at some point?
Yes, once we were going to present the results, I believe.
Have you ever heard complaints from the Milwaukee Police Department about Dr. Hassel's work?
I have not from the Milwaukee Police Department.
Have you heard complaints from any other third party about Dr. Hassel's independent consulting work?
So there was one incident when I was.
Your Honor, I'm sorry, I objected based on relevance. Has nothing to do with.
Lawrence?
I am establishing why the university might want to distance itself from Dr. Hassel's private consulting work.
The question in the situation is to whether or of what Dean Stojkovic was reasons for his letter, not dealing with why she might, if these things were not things that were shared with the dean prior to his letter, they're irrelevant. So, you know, the whole thing regarding that matter is to what is the basis for his, you know, for his letter? Can and I also just wanted to note, I am a habitual Mr. or Ms. Person, but understand the circumstances that there's been a bunch of dealing with talking about doctor, you know, of the matter, and if any way that referring to as same as everybody else has offended you, Ms. Hassel, that I'm sorry. Should I, in the circumstances, it's nothing, doesn't cost me any. If you very much prefer in the matter after the work to be called doctor, or am I dealing with a situation, I will do that. Is that something that you would prefer me to do?
It's not necessary.
Okay, well, I don't want to, certainly in the matter that I don't want to put it on some people and not other people, or suggest that somebody's being a doctor is more important than somebody else's. I at least try to be consistent about that. I haven't done it with anybody because they're dealing with a situation. I respect people all equally. Is there some, you know, so just want to indicate, because I just aware of the fact that dealing with in the situation, and it's sort of a toughened way to sort of negotiate that. If not said otherwise, I will do the same and things with everybody. And so that means just saying this do either Ms. Herzog, are you of the view that I should put the doctor honorific in front of some people, or a situation, or you have any issue with my being consistent about everybody?
I have no issue with your consistency. I have to call everyone doctor because I have to work with these people a lot, and the titles are important to them, which I respect.
Okay, well, the thing is, I need to do it, you know, and at least in my understanding and just dealing with the circumstances that I have heard from you, Dr. Hassel, that sometimes that you refer to people in one way and sometimes the other. I don't think that you have referred consistently. If both of you are calling everybody appropriate doctor, then it seems inconsistent for me not to reflect the both of your usage. Is that, um, Dr. Hessel, is it your normal situation to be called and to call other people at the university doctor?
I'm interacting with my colleagues, we use first names, but so to be professional, I'm referring to them using their titles, professor or
Okay.
doctor.
Okay, so my understanding is that since both of you are doing in a certain ways, then it sounds a bit jarring or different for me not to use the language that both of you are using, and so I will seek to do that in the manner just so that we are speaking consistently. And if both of you are, then it sounds, and I've sort of been recognizing that as we go along, that's why I raised it. It seems a little jarring or whatever for if you both are saying it for me not to. So I will call you Dr. Hassel henceforth and go in that manner to be consistent with both of your usage. Yes, but I don't use first names. Um, that is, I cannot, my parents raised me different, and I can't call people in situations that, by their first names. It's just not right. So, okay, thank you for your, I, I want to respect the situation that exists. So, go ahead with the next question.
So what I'd like to do is ask a different question that would establish whether the question I was asking earlier is relevant.
Okay.
So what I would ask is whether Dr. Freiberger ever reported to the dean's office prior to 2017 complaints she'd heard from a third party about Dr. Hassel's consulting. And I want to ask
Objection,
that
hearsay.
question. So I want to
Yeah,
ask that question to establish the relevance of whether she'd heard any.
And I'm
yeah,
objecting
but
based on hearsay.
But it's not. It's going to the state of mind of the dean for the letter. So that's not hearsay. Hearsay is things offered for their truth. Um, this isn't being offered for its truth. If Dean Stojkovic is told certain things, what matters in dealing with that letter is his motivation. If it's based on um, a legitimate perception of an issue, then it is not, then it's one thing. You're claiming that it was generated or intended that is motivated by something else, and so that the issue of his motivation is what's at issue, and so if it goes to his motivation, then it's relevant. So, yes, and the thing is, and the matter is that, and in that regard, all that's matters is what his conversation what her conversation was with Dean Stokovich. Anything else that she knows that she doesn't report or describe to him is not relevant.
Your Honor, if it's about his motivation, wouldn't the question be suitable for him and not
No,
Dr.
because
Freiberger?
dealing with that, it has two parts because the situation is that you have a conversation between two people which you are likely to dispute. And so that this confirms that there are two parties to that conversation, her as far as, what she says, and him, so they have every right to call both parties to a conversation that matters for the case. So
Okay.
yes, you can ask about him too, but that there are two parties presumably to this conversation, and both of them can testify to what was said in it.
Okay.
Okay, so the question is, did you ever, did you ever report to Dean Stokovich that there was, that you were told of any concerns about the representations of Dr. Hassel?
I definitely talked to Guat Lee, who was the associate dean at the time, about the phone call because it's a little bit jarring to me. I don't recall if I talked to Stan about it directly or not, but I would have definitely I definitely did talk to Associate Dean Guat Lee.
So then it's
Okay,
hearsay
just
because
hold on a second, dealing with this. We haven't had a question further. And how do you spell the last name of
L I
Watley?
Lie.
Oh, um, okay. So my understanding is that he is not going to be testifying today or not.
No. Gwatley will not testify, so.
Okay, so all right, so she's saying that she didn't talk to directly to the dean about it, but certainly that this is dealing with it. It said we have to connect that up. It does relate to whether make it more likely that if he heard something about it, but and just to check, but a real to check is that what exactly did you say?
Your Honor, I'm objecting based on hearsay.
I understand, but the thing is, and the thing in the matter is that we have a three-step situation rather than two. The claim is dealing with that she reported to him, who reported to Dean Stukovich. I have to determine whether that what she says to reported only becomes it goes to the question as to whether it's credible that he reported receiving it. It doesn't go to in the matter. So just, and this is a discrete issue, so I overrule your objection on the situation. Obviously I can't, this is just when we have a circumstances in which, well, there's two parts of this. One is under the chapter 227, that we don't go by, it doesn't say that we go by precisely the rules of evidence, but all the different characterizations of that and considerations are being considered. And it doesn't say that hearsay stuff can't be considered. I just don't do it in almost admitted in almost any situation. But here we have a matter that the communication has a direct relationship to the credibility of any of hearing it by Dean Stekovich, and so that I'm viewing that this is I'm overruling objection. So what exactly do you remember telling him?
Just to clarify, I don't recall if I had a conversation with Stan or not, but I do recall having a conversation with Gwatley. So
Okay, so just as saying in the matter is that you might have with the dean,
correct. I don't
might have, but you don't remember it.
correct. So the conversation I had with Gwatley was that I was at the police department training center for a training, and I was sitting in the training, and I got asked to go out to the hallway because Mr. Attenberg from the prosecutor's office wanted to speak with me. So I walked out into the hallway, and he asked
How do you
me.
spell his last name?
I think it's Attenburg, I believe, Attenberg. And so he said that there were some other people there too. There's somebody else in the prosecutor's office. I can't remember the individual's name, but there's at least one, maybe even two other people. And they asked me for some advice about what to do because they were working on a project with Dr. Hassel, and there was a conflict with her. And they said that she was making a really serious accusation against them. And they said it was not true, but it was written in email, and that can be damaging to them. And that they asked what to do, or if I would talk to the person she was working with, if I would talk to him and, provide advice or support or what the university could do. And I just explained, it was a very short conversation. I said, it has nothing to do with UWM. Kimberly is working as a consultant, so it doesn't involve me at all. And then that was the end of the conversation. Later on, however, I did get a phone call from the ADA. I believe his first name was Chris. I think his last name was Ladwig, maybe. I'm not 100% sure I recall that correctly. And he called and he said that he was having a lot of issues, that again, that there was some accusation that was being made. And he said that, he'd always gotten along really well with Dr. Hassel, and she had conflicts with all the other partners, but they always had a good working relationship. And he was at a loss of what to do. I told him, again, this is not a UWM issue. It's an issue between you and Dr. Hassel. And then he said, well, is there any kind of person one-on-one advice you can give? And so I said, ask her to go have a cup of coffee and discuss it. And that was the end of the conversation. Very short phone call. And that was it. And then I talked to Gwad about it because it was jarring. It was unexpected. And I just, she would advise me as the associate dean.
Okay, go to the next question.
I'm going to ask you some questions about the IRB investigation into Dr. Hassel's work. Do you recall who first raised the issue of possible noncompliance?
It was Dr. Tom LaBelle.
Did he raise the issue once?
No. So the first time he raised it was Dr. Hassel had put in a request for sabbatical, and she was supposed to attend that meeting, but she got tied up with something else and ended up not being able to attend, and sent an email saying she couldn't call in because she didn't have the phone number. So we had to have the meeting without her. And Dr. LaBelle voiced his frustration that he had really wanted to ask about some IRB noncompliance and was unable to. The other individual in the meeting, Dr. Brandel, we just were kind of like, let's just kind of move on. But so he was frustrated about that. That was the first time he brought it up. I believe he brought some kind of like documentation about things he was concerned about, or I think it was on the sabbatical application that was concerning to him. So that was the first time. And then there was several times, I don't know how many, but he would come to my office and raise this concern.
So how did you end up talking to Melissa Spadnuda about?
So so the associate dean kind of oversees the department chairs. So the departments, like they're kind of they're the next level. So you have the departments, and then you kind of have the associate dean and then the dean. So I would talk to Gwat on a very regular basis about any kind of issues or things. And so I talked to her a couple times about it, and I asked her, what do I need to do? What kind of responsibility do I have? And she and I discussed it. To be completely honest, I just really wanted to stay out of it. I really didn't want to have anything to do with it, and Gwat understood that. But Dr. LaBelle kept bringing it up. So I went to Associate Dean Lee and I asked her, like, do I have a responsibility as the department chair that I need to do this? And she said, I don't know. Then she picked up the phone and she called someone. I don't know if I don't remember who she called or if I didn't know who she called, but she called someone and talked to them about it. And then after that phone call, we ended up having a meeting. And I was asked to attend the meeting, and Melissa was in attendance of that meeting.
At that meeting, did you instruct Melissa Spadnuda to open an IRB investigation?
I did not instruct her to open an investigation, no.
Do you recall anyone instructing her to open an investigation?
No, she said that she was going to open up an investigation. That came from her. In fact, with the sabbatical application, I asked if I had to give it to her because I wanted no part of it.
Have you ever told the IRB how to conduct an investigation?
No.
Have you ever told the IRB what findings it should make?
No,
Have you ever been found non-compliant by the IRB?
I have. I've had a couple times. One, I lost the front page of a consent form. So I had the signed copy, but I didn't have the front page. Another time, I had a doctoral student who was a research assistant on my project. I cannot recall. He went to site to either do focus groups or interviews and did the other one. I can't remember which direction it went. And then when I found that out, of course, I reported it to the IRB as noncompliance. And then recently, I over-enrolled one of my projects. I enrolled too many participants, so I had to report noncompliance.
So on each of those occasions, did you receive a non-compliance letter?
Yeah, probably. I don't recall exactly, but I would have received some documentation, yes.
So having been found in non-compliance, do you find that to be a punishment?
No, it's not a punishment. So when we do a research study, we develop a protocol, and that protocol outlines what we do in our research. So that's kind of like an agreement with the university of what we're going to do. And if we like mistakenly violate that agreement or purposefully, I don't think that happens very often, but if there's some kind of violation, then we report that to the IRB, or maybe the IRB becomes aware of it somehow, and then you fill out some paperwork and you explain it, and then the IRB reviews it, and then they come back. And sometimes, like with the doctoral student who did the focus group instead of the interview or vice versa, they asked to develop a training plan, which obviously I needed because I thought the student would know that we have to stick with what the plan is intended. So there might be some kind of, something that you need to do as a follow-up, but it's not a punishment. It's really a protection. Plus the IRB is very helpful. Like when I saw the wrong method was used on site, I was, really concerned, and I called them right away, and they were really, really helpful. They were very supportive. So it's really a way to kind of protect us, because then we're not liable if something happens.
Those are my questions. I'm going to reserve the right to redirect if.
Yep. Okay. Cross.
Would you say there's a difference in having someone report you for allegations of noncompliance versus you calling in to report yourself or to let the IRB know yourself that there was noncompliance? Would you say there's a difference between that?
Well, I was actually investigated because somebody complained about me to the IRB. Nothing did come out of it, but I actually did get reported before. I didn't really think it wasn't really that big of a deal. I had to respond. They asked specific questions about a few of my papers. So that wasn't really concerning. And also, like the consent form, when that was found, that was actually an audit, because the IRB does audit sometimes where they come in, they audit your study. Usually it's high risk, especially federally funded studies. They come in, it's a couple hours long. They go through all of your stuff. They go through your protocol, they go through every consent form.
Ma'am,
Sorry.
you need to just answer the question and
Oh,
stop.
sorry. Okay.
Okay.
I'm
So,
an academic. We like to talk a lot.
I know that there's a tendency of people trying to be helpful or whatever in the situation, but please just answer the question and stop. Thank you.
Sorry. Thank you.
Dr. Freiberger, an audit is different than a report of allegation. Is that correct?
Yes.
Yes or no?
Yes.
Thank you. You testified that you first became aware of potential noncompliance in August of 2014.
I don't remember the date, but I do remember it was the day of the sabbatical meeting. But if that was the date, I don't know.
It was early fall semester 2014. Would that okay. Okay. And do the meeting minutes reflect that the discussion about potential noncompliance, that was a discussion of noncompliance?
No, because we actually didn't have a discussion during the meeting. This was prior when we were deciding whether to continue with the meeting or reschedule.
Okay, so when you testified that you had a meeting about Dr. Hassel's sabbatical and you discussed or Dr. LaBelle brought up potential noncompliance, it wasn't really a meeting. Is that right? You testified it was a meeting, but it's not really a meeting.
Well, we did have a meeting that day.
So was the discussion about potential noncompliance, was that in a meeting or not in a meeting?
It was before the meeting
Okay.
when we were waiting for you to arrive. And then found out you were not going to come.
You testified in an earlier hearing that after that sabbatical meeting, Dr. Hassel, I attended every single faculty meeting and executive committee meeting since then. Is that correct?
I do not recall, but if I said it, I'm sure that is probably correct.
Have I attended every meeting since that meeting?
Objection, what's the relevance of
remember.
this?
Eggman, if there's an objection, Ms. Freiberger, then just wait for the things. It's not relevant. Go on to something else.
There were many opportunities to discuss the matter with Dr. Hassel. Is that correct?
Objection, relevance?
Remember that this witness is not a management. It's that my understanding is that functionally she's a coworker, so her actions are not actions of the respondent. So that what the relevance of her testimony has to do with communications to somebody who was acting for the respondent. So then whether or not that she could have done something different or in the circumstances, that's not relevant because she is not in a management position. So go ahead with your next question regarding it. She has a limited role in the relevant testimony in this case. Go ahead to the next question.
You testified that Dr. LaBelle really wanted to discuss the matter with Dr. Hassel. Is that correct?
He said he wanted to bring it up in the meeting. Yes.
Okay. And so Dr. LaBelle would have had opportunities to discuss the matter with Dr. Hassel, correct?
Objection, this is the same objection I just had.
We're not there. You need to go on, Dr. Hassel. This is not in the situation because we have to get to matters relating to the case and the matters, and I know you have a variety of different issues, but most of them are not in front of me, and I have no right to make any judgment about them. So go on to something that is relevant.
You applied for IRB review of the STOP project before you presented at academic conferences?
I believe so. I haven't gone back and looked at the dates, but I believe that that's the case. I would hope so.
You testified that you were going to present at an academic conference, and so you got IRB review. Is that still your testimony?
I don't remember the exact dates of things, but that's how I remember it. I remember that I pursued IRB because it was going to enter into the realm of research.
And your understanding is that a presentation makes an evaluation research?
I believe it. Well, I'm not sure. I think if you presented at an academic conference, yes. I mean, these are questions for the IRB.
And you did contact the IRB on 4 different times to ask about this question. Is that correct?
Objection, this is now, again, becoming irrelevant.
Yeah, and again, we're not getting into the question as to whether it was reasonable, unreasonable, or what for you, Dr. Hassel, to have not consulted with the IRB on those occasions. That's not what this hearing is about. So in the circumstances, or we're not talking about the IRB investigation itself, because that's not part of the hearing either. So you need to go to something which has to do with your case, which this doesn't. So please, dealing with that, it needs to get to the questions of how the IRB investigation was started, how it got to, at the time in 2017, and in dealing with the other issues that actually have to do with your case. So please go to the next thing, and not involving just simply another question in the same line of questioning. So go on to a different area than you were just questioning about. Go ahead to the next question.
I do have evidence I'd like to submit for impeachment purposes.
And that is not in the circumstances in the matter that I don't allow testimony regarding other things that are relevant for impeachment purposes in any direction. So go ahead with your, it has to be relevant to be admissible. I don't allow it by anyone in the circumstances. I have to deal with credibility, and in addition, that the area of her credibility testimony that would matter is very small given her role in this case. Go ahead to the next question.
So if she has lied under oath, it's not a credibility issue?
The determination of dealing with I am not in the position of the circumstances. Claims that somebody did in the matter are not, has there been a criminal violation, criminal finding of,
No, I'm not.
no, I'm saying if the court has not found that she has lied under oath, it's not admissible. Your claims of the situation are not that she did. I'm not going into those at all, in part that they are litigation or claims of the other claims. So
I'm
no,
not.
I'm not going into your claims that somebody lied under oath for this situation will not be gone into. So go on to something else.
That's not what I was saying, Your Honor. I'm saying that I have evidence that contradicts what she just said. That's all I'm saying, which goes to credibility is all I'm saying.
But that the credibility on what she just said is not relevant because it was a minor in the situation. So I'm not going there. So go ahead with something which is relevant.
Okay, Dr. Freiberger, do you have any evidence that you received this phone call from somebody stating that I made some sort of allegation or accusation? Do you have any evidence that occurred?
No.
Okay.
I mean, the evidence just is saying that other than her memory, and that's all that the situation, so that in the situation she remembers it happening. But if you're talking about something else, it is that is evidence. Remembering it is evidence. So go ahead with. So she has testified that it's happened in the situation. So go ahead with the something that is relevant.
Okay,
please.
may I ask it a different way? Do you have any corroborating evidence?
Objection. The whole point of that testimony is what she told the dean's office. So is the question, does she have evidence that she told the dean's office?
Do you have evidence that you told the dean's office?
She has her memory, which is what was
Yeah,
just discussed.
so the question is not dealing with it. She remembers telling the dean's office. So
Okay, all right.
dealing with a situation, that we need to go to something which is relevant here. Go on to the next question.
Got it. Are there policies mandating that faculty members have to apply for external grants to fund research projects?
Not that I'm aware of, no.
Okay. And you testified that you've engaged in remunerative work at UWM, correct?
Correct.
Would you say that work benefited the university?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. You were chair of the department, as you testified. You were appointed by Dean Stojkovic, is that correct?
So, yeah.
Yes or no? Were you appointed by Dean Stojkovic?
Yes, with a faculty approval vote.
in your role as department chair, well, actually, let me ask it this way. So this is complainant, let's see. This would be complainants exhibit 3. It's UWM chapter 4, policies and procedures regarding the role of the chairperson. Are you familiar with the policy?
Can I ask Dr. Freiberger, do you have the exhibits in front of you or do you need them shown on screen?
I don't.
I'm just going to ask, I mean, she may need it. If you want to share the screen, that would be fine. It's ERD 025.
Is this hopefully appearing?
It is. See whether you can get there first before.
Is this the right page, Dr. Hassel?
Yes, I've got this big. Yes, these are the departmental, the duties of the departmental chairperson. This is a list of the duties of the departmental chairperson. Is that correct?
It looks like it, yes.
Okay. And so, as the chair of the department, you serve as the official channel of communication for all matters affecting the department as a whole between the department and the dean. Is that correct, according to policy?
That is what it says.
Okay, great. And that's been in effect since it looks like 2006, correct?
Okay, sure.
Okay. So then, and look at number 5, it says reports to the dean regarding activities and needs of the department in your role as chairperson.
Object on relevance.
What
Just
again?
establishing-
What does this have to do with what your claim is? There's all kinds of things that you want to dispute, and
If you let me
again,
get there.
no, because the way you're thinking the matter is that where you have shown repeatedly that you're going into a whole bunch of areas that are not relevant. So if you can't show me, go directly to the relevant places. Do not go on places where it is not. So
All right.
if there's
Doc-
something relevant, go there immediately and not. So what is the relevant part of that?
Dr. Freiberger, when you were department chair, did Dean Stojkovic delegate responsibilities and tasks for you to do on behalf of the department?
Like, I don't really understand. Like, what? Can I have an example?
Well, so you served as the official channel of communication, right?
Yes.
And you reported to the dean the activities and needs of the department. So I'm asking you, did Dean Stojkovic ever delegate tasks for you to do based on your role as a department chair on behalf of the department?
Yes, of course. So the university.
That's it, Dr. Freiberger. Thank you so much. Yes. Okay. And you talked about.
Do you need to continue to have that sharing, or can she
No, I
take that
don't.
down?
I don't need it.
Okay.
You talked about the department chair reporting to the associate dean, who reported to the dean, sort of like a chain of command. Is that not officially, but sort of a formal channel of communication? Is that correct?
That's what our org chart would look like.
Okay, thank you so much. And as the department chair, you're the administrative head of the department. So you would, as department chair, you handled administrative matters on behalf of the department. Is that correct?
Some are shared with the EC.
Okay. And you were chair of the EC, correct?
Correct.
Okay. The executive committee is the EC.
The executive,
Okay. The duties of the chairperson, does that include being liable for the activities reported on somebody's activity report?
I don't know that. I don't know.
You wouldn't know if there would be like the department chair would have a liability issue because.
Objection. What's the relevance of this question? It's also.
What are these
That's the
dealing with?
explanation.
Are you trying to? My understanding is that we have had clear that the And my understanding is that you've acknowledged that the chair and other colleagues are not supervisors. Are you trying to claim that she is?
I'm not, Your Honor. I'm just trying to
Okay,
establish
then if
that
she
there's,
isn't, then in dealing with these matters are irrelevant, and please go on to something else in the situation because, um, you know, this is not objection sustained. Go into some other areas other than the duties of the chair.
okay. I'm trying to collect evidence to distinguish between the justifications for the adverse actions in testimony and what is written in a position statement.
Well, the thing is in the matter that you need to go and again, the testimony needs to be dealing with about, no, we're not going into the position statements. Don't open up every different things that they have testimony they're responding to regarding the case today. So no, we're not going there.
Okay.
Go ahead with it needs to be testimony on what occurred in the situation rather than responses to things that may or may not be relevant in the position statement.
The STOP project you conducted with Dr. Hassel, that involved surveying and conducting focus groups with juveniles, is that correct?
Correct.
And you received half the contract amount for both of those projects?
Objection, relevance.
It's not relevant. And again, in the situation, there's a certain amount of on these cross examinations, you have to be at a certain point of continued irrelevant questions, I have to say no more. So unless that you can get to where it's relevant in the situation, then, I keep going into areas that have nothing to do with your case. So
Okay.
go there if you want to ask, if you have relevant questions, go there and not go to these places that aren't.
Okay, Dr. Freiberger, has Dean Stojkovic marketed has he ever marketed your remunerative consulting work as a Helen
Which
Baker
is,
School social welfare
it's
project?
also not relevant to this case. Please go again, that you need to go in. We're not dealing with, that is not an issue in this case. So in this situation, and we've discussed that before, I'll give you another couple tries at these cross examinations, and if you continue to be completely irrelevant, then I'm going to cut off your cross examination. So go to something that's relevant regarding her role and dealing with what is established that is part of your the case against the school.
You testified that when you met with Melissa Spadanuda on March 24, 2017, that you provided the sabbatical proposal. Is that correct?
I believe, yes, I had it, or maybe Guap brought it. I do recall asking her if I had to give it, and she said that I had to comply with an investigation. I believe it was a sabbatical proposal. I believe it was a document, one document.
And the sabbatical proposal would be from 2014, is that correct?
That sounds right.
Have you, you've conducted research with the Milwaukee Police Department, is that right?
Yes.
In 2014, 2015, around that time period, were you conducting research with the Milwaukee Police Department about hotspots?
Objection, relevance.
And you're, again, not relevant. Go into something. Give you two more tries, and if they're back and talking about things that happened in 2014 or something that is completely relation, I'm going to cut off cross. So if it doesn't have to do with the issues that have been tried to clear, that it's about this case, then I'm these. And if it starts off talking about something in 2014, the odds of it being relevant in this case are really small. So I'll give you two more tries, and if they're both completely irrelevant, I'm going to cut off cross. Go ahead with the it's something that is relevant to this case.
Okay. So you testified that you first became aware of concerns about Dr. Hassel's remunerative projects and IRB review in 2014, correct?
It was at the from my recall, it was at the sabbatical meeting. It was the first time, that day was the first day that I heard about it.
Okay.
The
And when
best
did
I
you,
can recall.
thank you. Sorry, I cut you off. When did you, do you recall when you discussed the matter with the Associate Dean Guatli?
No, I don't. I had several conversations with her about it. So I don't remember because she and I talked a lot, about department stuff because she, again, oversees the departments.
And just, can you give me a year anyway?
Um, I just really don't recall. I mean, I do recall talking to her about it several times. I recall Professor LaBelle bringing it to me several times. And again, she understood the reasons why I really didn't want to
Again,
do
I
anything.
just wanted
Okay,
dealing with the
sorry.
timing, and you don't have
I'm sorry.
any other memory as to when that was.
I
Okay,
don't.
go ahead to the next question.
Okay. I'm not sure if I asked this, but you testified you discussed the matter several times with Dr. LaBelle and with Associate Dean Guatli. Did you ever discuss the matter with Dr. Hassel?
No.
Did, were you ever concerned about the remunerative activities of Dr. Brandel and whether they went through IRB review?
No.
Did you ever, so at the meeting you attended on March 24th, did you discuss Dr. Brandel's remunerative consulting work or provide any documentation of it to the IRB?
Not that I recall.
Are you aware that Dr. Brandel was involved in a tremendous amount of remunerative consulting work?
Object on relevance.
My understanding is that the distinction regarding remunerative is not, it's does not appear from anything that I've heard from other witnesses in the matter to the reasons for bringing it up, the question up. And also that she has testified that she only brought it up because of the persistence of Ms. LaBelle's or Dr. LaBelle's persistent raising of the issue, and that there's no testimony that that situation existed before. And also we have a situation that her state of mind or her motivation is not at issue in this case because she's not a supervisor. So go ahead with something else.
Did Dr. LaBelle ever express concerns to you regarding Dr. Stojkovic's remunerative consulting and IRB review?
Not that I recall.
Did Dr. LaBelle discuss concerns about IRB review for any other faculty member other than Dr. Hassel?
Yes.
Who was that person?
He was concerned about my some of my research over the years. It's been approved by IRB, but just the populations, and he has talked about just through conversations, just various kinds of research that he comes across as a member of the IRB.
Okay, so he just discussed with you like IRB matters. He didn't have concerns that you hadn't run projects through the UWM IRB. Am I understanding that correctly?
Correct.
Okay, thank you. Are there university policies regarding remunerative consulting work?
Again, we're not the distinction regarding remunerative, so go on to something else we've already talked about. That's not the distinction in dealing with that. The basis for the report, my understanding, had nothing to do with the distinction about being remunerative or not. So go ahead with something else.
But the letter had to do with remunerative
Anyway,
work.
go ahead with something else.
Unbelievable. Okay. Have you ever heard Dean Stojkovic discuss somebody's private consulting as a Helen Bader School social welfare project?
Yes, I believe so. I believe it's sounded like that before. Yes.
Okay, thank you. Are there any policies stating that practitioners with whom a faculty member works in a remunerative capacity cannot discuss that as UWM research? Are there any policies to that effect?
Objection, relevance.
Response?
That's what this whole matter is about. So I'm just asking if there's a written policy. That's the basis for the letter. I'm just asking if there's a written policy about it.
My understanding is that the written policies that exist that either party is saying have been provided to me, and either that there is one that you can refer to in your brief or not. Her testimony regarding that wouldn't add to the situation, so I'll sustain the objection.
Okay. You testified a bit about the difference between running a contract through the university and having a private contract, correct? And you made mention about not having as much control. That's what I wanted to ask you. That was a note for myself. When you run a contract through the university, or when an agency runs a contract through the university, does the university sign a detailed contract about what can happen and what cannot happen?
I don't know. That's all handled through the Office of Sponsored Projects.
Okay. And so you're aware, like, when you conduct remunerative consulting work with the Milwaukee Police Department, they'll include statements such as you can't discuss this research without express permission from somebody in the department, things like that. They can control the messaging, correct, if it's a private consultant relationship?
Well, they can do that with UWM too. Yes, that can be done with both.
Okay, so that can happen. So you are aware so you are aware of what the contracts are with the Office of Sponsored Research?
Well,
Objection, that's not what she just testified.
no.
No,
That's what
and it's
that's
not
what I
what she
heard.
testified to, so go ahead and ask them dealing with the situation. She said that she has not been involved in those contracts, so asking her about the contents of those contracts or what's not in them is not within her scope, so go on to something else.
Right, she testified that she didn't know, and so then she
Go
just
on to
testified that she
something
knew.
else, please.
Okay. Did you list your remunerative consulting projects on your annual activity reports?
Objection, relevance.
Not relevant, go on to something else.
Are your remunerative consulting projects considered part of your, faculty duties?
It's not in the dispute, dealing with, again, couple more tries, and then I'll say that you've exhausted the matter. You need to go into something that relates to your case here.
Okay, I don't have any more questions right now, but I may have questions later.
Redirect.
Dr. Freiberger, you said the dean can delegate tasks to department chairs. What kind of tasks are delegated by the dean to department chairs?
So sometimes, let me see. There's things like new university policies that sometimes come into play. Usually, if somebody is up for a contract renewal, will request that'll come from the dean's assistant. Will come from a request for the EC to vote on that. There's just things that come up from the university, so that the deans may be told that something needs to be done. Like for an example, right now, the university wants us to go through all the listservs. And so that's something that will eventually be delegated down to the department level, down to the department chairs, that they need to go through all the listservs and just make sure that they're all legitimate listservs. So there's all kinds of things like that.
I can tell you about the listserv someday. Were you ever delegated the task of requesting an IRB investigation ever?
No.
Specifically, when you sought information on how to deal with Dr. LaBelle's report, did Guatley or anyone else direct you to request an IRB investigation?
No.
And did Stan Stojkovic ever direct you to discuss Kimberly Hassel with the IRB?
No.
That's all I have.
Any cross?
Not at this time, Your Honor.
Okay, so my understanding is thank you very much, ma'am, and you're excused.
Thank you.
Okay, and do you have dealing with the, who is next?
Your Honor, could we take a break, please? It's 11 o'clock. Could we take a lunch break?
Okay, you want to take who's, I wanted just to find out whether the next person was the short witness or, I mean, my understanding is that, well, just who is next?
So my only remaining witnesses are Stan Stojkovic and Jay Capellish. I imagine Stan will take longer than Jay.
Right. And I was just wondering in dealing with the, certainly if the him, but just dealing with that,
So
this is just a bit early for lunch in the situation if there's a short witness left. So,
Could I take a quick bathroom break then, Your Honor?
of course, of course.
Great, thank you.
Okay.
Sure.
Sir, would you raise your right hand, please?
Yes.
Do you solemnly swear the testimony about to give in this matter be the truth, whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
Yes.
Okay, and would you please state and spell your name?
Sure. My name is Jay, Jay, Capellish, Kapellusch.
Okay, go ahead, counsel.
thank you. Could you tell us your position at the University of Wisconsin-Milwaukee?
Yes, I am a professor in the Department of Rehabilitation Sciences and Technology in the College of Health Sciences, where I am also currently department chair, have been for many years. And at present, I am the vice chair of the IRB, having recently stepped back into that role from chair for, I forget how many years, due to increasing administrative responsibilities. In July, I stepped back from chair to vice chair.
And what was your role with the IRB in 2017?
I was vice chair at that time as well.
The IRB conducts a lot of reviews. That's a fair assessment.
Yes.
Are those
Yeah.
reviews?
Objection, Your Honor, it's vague, a lot.
Go ahead to the next question.
Are the IRB's reviews a punishment?
No, we never consider reviews of any form or investigations to be a punishment.
Does the IRB ever issue non-compliance letters?
Yes.
Are non-compliance letters a punishment?
No, not from our perspective.
Do you recall reviewing Dr. Hassel's projects in 2017?
I recall some of the details, having now been a few years ago. It's the specifics I won't have a perfect recall of.
Do you recall who directed you to conduct that investigation?
I was assigned as one of the primary reviewers of the investigation of noncompliance by then Chair Aaron Busa.
Did
Could you
any,
spell that?
It's Aaron Buseh.
Go ahead.
and just to clarify, what was his role at that time?
Aaron was chair of the IRB at that time.
So was it typical for him to direct IRB members to investigate?
The IRB investigates all information that comes to us, whether it's something that we discover on our own or is referred to us as a deviation or non-compliance. And it is typical for either the chair or the IRB administrator to assign the subcommittee that does the investigations.
And I'm just going to clarify, when you say the chair, the IRB chair.
IRB chair,
Got it.
correct.
Thank you. With respect to Dr. Hassel's, investigating Dr. Hassel's work, do you recall any deviation from your standard procedures?
No.
Dr. Hassel claims that the review was abnormally burdensome. Is that your recollection?
Objection, Your Honor. When did I claim it was overly burdensome?
It said there, but we're not going into
Sure.
the.
I'll withdraw that.
So go ahead.
Do you recall who made the decision of non-compliance in Dr. Hassel's case?
Actually, formal decisions on non-compliance are made by a vote of the full board.
Does anyone tell the board how to vote?
No.
Did anyone tell, to the best of your knowledge, did anyone tell the board how to vote in Dr. Hassel's case?
No. The subcommittee presents facts to the board renders a decision at its discretion.
Do you recall anyone outside of the IRB telling you how to conduct the investigation into Dr. Hassel or what finding to make? Or
No. And there's that, if it were to happen, the IRB would disregard such a request.
in your opinion, should Dr. Hassel's projects have come to the IRB?
I forget the exact details of the projects. My recollection is that there were 3 under review, 2 were fairly easily classified as okay, meaning no non-compliance, and that 1, in retrospect, should have come forward as a dissemination request from an existing data set.
Thank you. Those are my questions, reserving the right to redirect.
Okay, Cross.
Hi. When reports of potential non-compliance are discussed with the IRB, then the normal procedure is to investigate. Is that correct?
The normal procedure is to investigate if the complaint or referral cannot easily be classified as a simple deviation or as acceptable, which my recollection without looking at our data is a majority of what we see is easily classified as a simple deviation or is in fact easily classified either not as noncompliance or as general noncompliance. The investigations occur when the chair or the IRB administrator cannot easily classify these as a deviation or general noncompliance or as merely an allegation that cannot be substantiated. That's when things move into an investigation. And standard practice is to investigate whenever that occurs.
Okay, thank you. Can you recall how many times the IRB has investigated allegations of noncompliance for a faculty member listing a conference presentation on their activity report, so a dissemination at an academic conference?
Objection,
no
relevance.
Which part of the issues involved? Remember, the issues involved only an attempt to influence by the outside. I'm unclear regarding whether you're dealing with what's been referred to the IRB or IRB choice of how to respond to that. Which one are you talking about, Dr. Hassel?
I'm
Because
just asking how frequently this issue comes up is what I'm asking.
well, I dealing with the situation because that's not what um that's not the way it was um that I heard the question. And just to check, um do you, and just to ask the question first in order to respond, are you the person that is contacted regarding, in all cases regarding um, non-compliance or dealing with, well, I'm sorry, I'm just trying to think. Is it correct that investigations are started with contacts with different people? Is that right?
So for IRB, there's a number of ways. Well,
I mean, how
strictly
many
speaking,
in the you've referred to this decision regarding simple, whether it's simple deviation, and that there's a decision to whether or not the case should be investigated, right?
that is correct. The
And
IRB
that
thinks in
is
terms
made
of
by
easy classification.
how many different people on the IRB are involved, make that decision?
The initial decisions are made typically by a combination of two people, the chair and the IRB administrator. Often
Okay,
things are simple enough that the IRB administrator can make a decision on their own.
okay, so the additional regarding what is fielded when it comes in, that is not something you're involved in, right?
Not in every one, no. The chair is involved in ones that are either a closer call or clearly require investigation.
But dealing with the vice chair, my understanding regarding that process, the vice chair is just assigned after that, right?
The vice chair is the immediate backup to the chair. So the vice chair could be involved in the initial steps if the chair is unavailable. And the vice chair, we more recently always have two vice chairs. One of the vice chairs is unless an exceptional circumstance of conflict or interest or something, the vice chair would always be involved in the investigation as one of the members.
Okay, so dealing with Dr. Hassel's question, just to say, my understanding is that this witness does not have foundation to answer your question, Dr. Hassel, because um, he is a infrequent frontline person regarding that question, to the extent that it raises then any discussion or comment we're getting to made as to what he would get, to the extent that it's relevant, would not be reflective necessarily regarding the scope of investigations because of his role in the process. So I view that he doesn't have the foundation to helpfully answer that question. So go on to something else.
Did you attend the meeting on May 1st, 2017 with Melissa Spananuda and Dr. Hassel?
I forget the exact dates. I did attend a meeting
Okay.
with Dr. Hassel and Melissa Spadnuda present. Yes.
Okay, great, thank you. And do you remember referring in that meeting to the issue under review as being confusing and unclear? Do you recall that?
I do recall a conclusion post this particular investigation where Melissa, Aaron, and I concluded that the IRB policies and procedures were not sufficiently clear regarding when publication and dissemination would become human subjects research, and concluding that we needed to improve the IRB's messaging and information to investigators in that regard. Yes.
Thank you. I think that's all the questions I have at the moment. Thank you so
Okay.
much.
Okay, then any redirect?
No, I don't have anything.
Okay, then thank you very much, sir, and you're excused.
Thank you.
All right, and then now in the circumstances, this would be a, is there anything else that we need to attend to prior to breaking for lunch?
I don't think so.
Me.
Not hearing anything, then come back at 12:25. Thank you.
Thank you.